This webinar is sponsored by Concur, whose representative in the room today is David Vine, over there on the left at the bottom of your screen. Concur, I'll actually let the guests introduce themselves. So it's David, the next person on is Miles, and then we have Stephen. And I guess we might as well start with you, Stephen. Could you tell us who you are, and I'll come back once with who you are and what your company does.
Hello, my name is Stephen Prescott. I'm Finance Director of SIFT, which is actually the holding company which Accounting Web forms part of. We've got 140 people working for us. We have a subsidiary in the USA, and we are involved with digital marketing. We build websites, we have online publishing, and we build also websites for charities and not-for-profits. And I'm actually very interested in this subject because actually we're involved in putting together, implementing an expense management program as we speak. So that's my relevance to this, and that's where we are. Okay.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. And Miles, how about you? Tell us more about you and your company and your interest in the subject.
Okay, I'm Company Secretary and Financial Controller of McNicholas Construction. I've been with McNicholas now for 9 years. To give you an idea of scale, our turnover is in the region of 150 million, and we employ about 1,400 employees. My interest in the subject is that I implemented a automation of a expenses system back in 2010, which was with a company called Global Expense, who have become part of Concur, and we are currently in the process of upgrading to the Concur Expense platform. I would like to point out, though, that I am independent of both Accounting Web and Concur.
Excellent. That's one of the good reasons we've got you along. And finally, on the bottom there, furthest away from me on the little screens, is David Vine. David, and what brings you here this morning?
Well, obviously we're sponsoring the event, and we're delighted to do so. So thank you everybody for joining. I'm the Managing Director of Concur's UK small and medium-sized business segment. We provide expense management services, travel services, and various extended services to companies of all sizes throughout the world. We have about 20,000 customers around the world, but specifically in the UK, we are really making great strides in servicing the small and medium-sized business sector with a rapid deployment methodology that's reducing the barriers to entry for companies. And I'm here really to hopefully offer some thought and guidance on how a business should think about expenses, the impact it might have on the business at large, and how one might go about implementing a system such as ours.
Right. Can you describe sort of what a typical day is, the things on your mind in a typical day? And what probably worries you most at the moment?
I think for us, it's a lot of this is obviously technology is coming to a stage where a lot of the cloud stuff we're really actively using. And do you take an analogy with CRM? We're pretty much, as an organization, on cloud as CRM. We have a lot of applications on the cloud. We've just implemented a full forecasting and budgeting system all on the cloud. So as we look to putting our sort of actual finance system probably next year on the cloud, we're going, okay, how do we sort of make progress to get every little bit on the cloud, and what do we need to do? And it's a matter of looking at the processes and going, understanding them fully and how we can sort of migrate them to a sort of an operating system that is much more efficient, use the technology, and start to take away the sort of the intricate administrative tasks that immensely involved, especially with expenses. But it's an analogy for everything. The raising of an invoice is no different than processing expenses in terms of your strategic shift. We want to have a slicker, integrated system that all works, and it means the staff change their role from doing something to actually being involved in analysing, understanding, checking, and sort of more in a sort of advisory role to add value. And I think this is what's going on, and it's at the moment it's putting all the pieces together. And I think sometimes I feel that we've got too many pieces, and they're not quite as compatible as they could be. Yeah, expenses at the moment, because we haven't implemented expense management, is a matter of physically looking at the expenses, and it would have been physically somebody's processed the expenses and somebody's physically filled the form in. So it's all about that. You know, we are looking at a paper record, even though we take the expense form, people fill them in electronically, and we're able to manually. We're able to upload them to our finance system. It's still sort of a clunky process, and so you know, I still sometimes just look at 10 or 20 expenses and just go for a review check. Now, obviously, if it was combined and everything, I would be able to do that in a sort of, you know, reporting way, look for exceptions, etc., etc. Now, you know, old habits die hard. It's one of those sort of, I think for a finance director, it's nice to look at the expense claim, look at the receipts, because you're looking for odd things. You know, you've got a feel for it. You know, it's the sub-analysis of the restaurant bill and all this kind of stuff. It's just something you do. You know, you're used to doing that, and it's a nice habit because, you know, you're used to it. And I think you've just got to move away and be able to sort of like look at it as a whole rather than sort of micro detail. And I think it's easy for an FD to just get involved in the detail too much. And it really, that task should be done by your accounts manager or your accounts clerk that's dealing with the expense system.
Yeah. Okay. Over to you, Miles. How strategic has your finance team got? And you know, do you recognise Stephen's plight? And have you been there yourself?
Oh, yeah, very much so. When I look at the tasks that any organisation has to deal with and face, in simple terms, you can say they fall into two categories: either they're routine or they're, if you like, ad hoc and
absolutely
value added. And for me, it's very much about collecting all the routine tasks and actually putting them in to a smaller box as possible, so they're consuming the least amount of resources in your organisation, so you can actually then divert those resources and that time to servicing customers and adding value. And of course, automation helps you actually reduce and compact those routine tasks.
How far along that path do you think you are, Miles?
Well, we're a way along. I think, I mean, in the industry that we're in, which is construction, it's not at the forefront of like cutting edge technology, but I'd like to think that we are quite a way down the journey. In 2009, 2010, we automated our purchase ledger, so we now receive our purchase invoices electronically from suppliers. I mentioned in the intro that we did our first automation of our expenses system back in 2010. 2012 saw us automate our account production, i.e. production of statutory accounts, and then 2014 we are looking to upgrade the staff expenses system, and then the next one on the list after that is e-payslips, which we've not done yet. So we're along the road.
Excellent. And I guess for both Stephen, we can come back to you. How receptive and how enthusiastic are your fellow board members for kind of putting in the investment and helping you streamline the function?
I think they are very supportive. I think they are a lot. It's very interesting. You have a sort of, everybody seems to think now everything is very easy to put on the cloud and do this, and everybody has this sort of expectation that everything should be instant. We have this sort of, we have a problem with the finance system. We have a monthly process, surprisingly, and we will always have a monthly process, and accounts will always have a monthly process, and they seem to think they want it instant. They want to instantly know what as you go through the month, what the month is going to be. Now, obviously, you can do that with forecasting, but there is a sort of a bit of a gap between what we do and what they want. It's quite hard sometimes. You say, yes, we're going to do the expenses, so they think, well, it's just a matter of just getting the system, configuring it, a day's work, and everything's done. There's a massive amount of work to do there. It's detailed, working out the configuration, everything like that, and you can get the principle agreed, but they're not really that interested in the sort of the nitty-gritty of it. And it's quite interesting that everybody has said they want this system, and then actually when we started doing some prototyping and some testing with various users, we had problem getting users because they weren't interested, because they just don't really actually want to do the hard little bit of nasty grafty work that I think finance tends to do an awful lot of. It's interesting, but we just will do it. We will do it, and then it's just, it's tough.
Okay, Miles, would that fit the McNicholas situation as well? That actually the principle of automation is accepted, and the board thought into that, but the trouble comes the practical implementation. Is that where the challenge lies?
Certainly, I would agree that the board have recognised the need to automate. We're in an industry where, and a lot of our clients are in regulated sectors like energy, for instance, and telecommunications, and of course they have regulators that are putting pressure on them, and of course one way our clients can meet those pressures is to exert the pressure on us. So it goes down the supply chain. So we've got to automate really to be able to maintain our margins. In terms of engaging people, I think if I said to our users now that we were going back to a paper-based system for expenses, they would just be all up in arms. It's just one of those situations where you're going to get resistance while you're on the one side, but as soon as it's in, people just accept it as normal and wouldn't have it any other way.
So is it fair to say, or sorry, Stephen, you were going to jump in first?
Yeah, I was just saying, the other thing is, I think with boards, the traditional thing, when you say we're going to do something like automate something, a process, they're expecting a sort of capital, spend 10 grand and get this benefit over there, the whole traditional capital investment proposal. But actually, all this software stuff is all on monthly charge. It's a different model. Everybody's on a different model. So you actually have to start going, well, that will cost you £200 extra a month, or or £10 per person, etc. So it's a completely different model. And then they start going, oh, that will cost me more than the accounts clerk I'm employing. Not necessarily. I'm not saying that we've done, but it is easy to do that and start going, well, actually, we're paying somebody 15 grand to do this, and you want to. It's a different equation. It's quite, and we've done quite a lot of with these cloud things, and they start to add up. They add up, and it's sort of like an ongoing commitment, and it's not really a sort of investment. It's an ongoing sort of process, monthly charge sort of arrangement, which is actually changing the game, because obviously my history of putting systems in is bigger systems that require a lot of 100 grand, 200 grand, those kind of amounts of money, which were really hard to get through. But once you got them through, you had the system. I think you have to go through the loop of understanding exactly how the data security is held, and that is where we use our CIO very extensively to understand exactly how it works, to interrogate their IT people, to understand, and to a certain extent we are in a bit of the industry, so we know it's very easy to work out very quickly where there are weaknesses. I think you have to do that, and that's not traditional finance type of stuff, because it's much more about, you know, how the cloud operates, how they back up, all this kind of stuff, and it's the SLA agreements, etc., etc. It's quite involved, and we lean on IT a lot in that respect. I think it's very important, and it varies massively. I think it's a colour of their money, and I'm seeing that when we look at a cloud bit of software, we're seeing, oh, the functionality works, this is fantastic, you know, it's great. And we can get to a very quick position where we like the stuff, we want to use it, and then we go through the IT thing, and then it's all about the logins, the roles and responsibilities, you know, all those kind of things can be quite different, and then security is one of them, and you quickly can just go, that is not acceptable. We cannot go with this outfit. They are too small. They haven't got the procedures in place. They haven't got the might, and they haven't thought about it properly.
Right, well, let's go to you, Miles. Hopefully, you know, you may have been there and got the T-shirt. You know, the question from the floor was about your security arrangements. Is that something you've got your own redundant systems, and how do you satisfy yourself that you're backed up and you're secure?
Are you talking specifically in terms of expenses management, or
expense management? But if you've also gone for other cloud services for finance functions in the cloud.
No, we don't use the cloud at all. So I've not got. So
okay. So let's just get back to poor David's been sitting there and been hearing, you know, the plight of, or not the plight, but just the day-to-day realities that you both face as finance managers. You were smirking there, David. How do Miles and Stephen's experiences compare to how other of your customers are? You know, are they typical of the experience you encounter, or is the wider industry racing ahead and taking a much more strategic approach to all of their finance activities?
Well, sadly, they are pretty reflective of the wider industry. Sadly for me, because it obviously it's a challenge for us to get to the sales numbers that we want to get to. But we have seen a change in attitudes over the last number of years as it becomes more and more acceptable, and as the industry itself drives towards the adoption of cloud technologies. If I can just go back to the whole cost issue. What Stephen said would have been exactly what I would have said to you. There is a perception on the board, and even sometimes at management, that the existing process is free. Well, of course it isn't. You're paying for the clerk to do it. You've probably got time-consuming, cumbersome processes for the employees to get it completed. You're also, in many cases, leaving a lot of VAT on the table because the way that the data is captured isn't accurate enough. And then you'll employ maybe a third party to come and get you that VAT back, and you'll give them 20% of it. And so if you add up all of those costs, and there's an acknowledgement that those costs impact the business, then cloud technologies all up typically offer tremendous value. Proving an ROI like you would do with an on-premise solution is very difficult, because typically it doesn't result in either redundancies or farming this off to here, there and everywhere, but the process efficiencies, the accuracy, the peace of mind in respect of compliance, particularly around expenses. Who can put a price on that in the current climate? So there are huge productivity gains, and it's also, just on that, if we were employing a salesperson, all right, everybody wants to grow their business. There's some research come out in the last couple of days about small and medium-sized enterprises really looking at growth. That's their number one aspiration, to get greater customer acquisition and growth. That means they need more salespeople. They don't provide those people with a 5-kilo laptop and a Nokia 6310i, because those are outdated technologies. Yet when it comes to expenses, we're still asking these people with smartphones and iPads and Ultrabooks and the like to come back into the office and complete a very clunky and old-fashioned form. Whereas if we could give it to them to do it in the field on their mobile device, the productivity gains are huge, and actually the satisfaction of employees is improved, and that results in greater performance. So it is typical. But if I can just address the security one as well.
Okay, back to security.
That is, again, that we see that less and less these days. But it is important that any provider you choose for cloud technologies has the relevant accreditations. So ISO 27001, for example, to make sure that the site meets the stringent security standards and development standards laid down by the Standards Institute. And if it's being housed outside of the EU, that they meet the safe harbour requirements and so on. So there are steps where you can have faith in an independent body that monitors the software development, where you should get a great deal of comfort that they've been independently audited.
Interestingly, we earlier this year, when we were looking at upgrading our existing automated expense software system, we actually conducted a small survey amongst our existing users, and it was only just over 10% of our users that we got to do the survey. But the two things that they particularly liked was that it was just easy to use. 40% found the system either very easy or extremely easy to use. There was, to counter that, 14% on the other side who found it not user-friendly, but they liked the ease of use. The other thing that we did, and we were quite particular about this, going from a paper-based system to an automated system, and given that we previously were only paying either monthly or weekly through the payroll, is that we actually set payment after approval rather than after approval and validation. And what that means is that they get paid 3 to 4 days after approval of their expenses.
That's good.
And that went down really well. That really does soften the blow.
Okay, we're going to move on. As I say, I promised we'll pick up that for a second, but I did promise the participants in this this webinar a poll. It links to the survey we've been conducting on the site ahead of this webinar of just to what extent our members have automated. So are you like Stephen, where it is pretty much primarily paper and Excel based, or are you more like Miles? The options will be up there on the screen for you, so we'll let them cook for a few minutes. And before we do, David, if you, again, just to pick up the question from the floor, can you offer any other practical tips or ideas just to sort of ease, to get an application? It doesn't, not just expenses automation, but just to break down the cultural barriers to more strategic tools.
Yeah, it's about change management for any adoption of online technologies into a business, and that has its own separate set of challenges. I remember, crikey, 10, 12 years ago, with some customers that expense claimants in particular were saying we're doing finance's job for them. Well, that's not the reality. The reality is you were probably always meant to be providing this information. You just never were, because it was impossible to check every single form and bring it back to you. So there has to be a change management plan and some form of, not necessarily consultation, but it needs to be presented to the individual so that they understand the benefit to them. I often liken it to if you're upgrading your operating system and your Microsoft Office suite, and some of the commands have moved. It's a little frustrating, but once you get the hang of it, typically you acknowledge that it's better and it's an improvement. And as Miles said right at the top, once you're in and you've overcome that hump, and that's where we need to have the courage as organisations. And I'm not saying that from a Concur expense situation. We ourselves adopt an awful lot of cloud technologies, and I have to get used to, right, I'm now storing my documents in a cloud store over here rather than on my laptop, and get over that hump. and then it becomes the norm. And as new people come into the business, this is the expenses system, this is the data storage system, this is how we process A, B, and C. CRM is the same, and we're seeing those adoption times drop dramatically given the advent over the last few years of smartphones. People expect everything to be done on a smartphone or on a tablet, and consequently their acceptance of it is much greater.
The interesting thing is that and this is what we've seen with the finance people, with our other implementations, is that they become more trainers and enablers than doers, which is really interesting, because you start to think, oh my goodness, this person is now doing something, I'm doing less, they're doing the things that I had to do, but I can train them to do the right thing. And then they become more, they start to sit back a bit from it and say, oh, I've got a little bit of time to make this better, even at the lowest level of just an accounts clerk. They're starting to realize that they're collaborating with the people to get the better result, which is really what is a shift that I suddenly saw as soon as we started doing all this, is that we're configurers, we're trainers, and then we're enablers, and then it becomes a lot easier. And we've seen this on our forecasting and budgeting system. It's just tremendous that you're effectively just sitting there watching for things, changing things, reviewing things, reflecting things. And that's, my management accountant, he's got lots of time to do that now, whereas we didn't used to have that. It was always just process, bang spreadsheets together, consolidate, add all this kind of stuff, just mindless sort of process.
Yeah, if you were an accounts clerk and you had the choice between manually checking a load of expense claim forms and rekeying it into an accounting system, or analysing data from an automated system and identifying where you've lost VAT and going and educating the workforce as how they can improve and get more money back for the company, which would you choose? And that's how it transforms the back office function.
And they love that thing where they start to say, they start to being like investigators and sort of like picking up things, and it's just like they become, oh, I love this. I found this and I found that, and instead, because when they just processing, you just never have the time for that. You might think it for a millisecond, but you haven't got the time. You've got to do the next expense claim or the next invoice or the next whatever it is. It is a cultural shift, but it's very interesting. It's actually sort of it's upskilling. Upskilling for finance is actually well overdue, I think, because it's always been very much a process-driven activity.
I agree wholeheartedly. With being accountants, we live by deadlines. And the danger is, as you said, Stephen, that you just go from one deadline to another and spending 80-90% of it producing, and only 10 or 20% actually looking at or making decisions on the information, the analysis.
I've had an analogy, when I remember producing accounts, and it was like, I'll do them, hit the deadline, and then suddenly I thought, oh, I've just produced them and sent them out. Oh God, I'll now look at them and read them. And it was like something that used to happen after I'd sent the damn things out, because you were so involved in that, putting that together and the process of it. It's just,
if you're not careful, the danger is you're into the next production cycle then. So it just goes on.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely, and you've got to have that more.
Yeah, coming back to the point about engaging the users and how you get over that hurdle. There's that saying, "What's in it for me," which is what any person faced with any sort of change management is looking at. It for. What is in it for me? Because you've got to give them something, and with us rolling out the automation on the expense management for the first time, what we gave them, if you like, was quick turnaround of payment, so they weren't hanging around waiting for their money after they use their own money to pay for company expenses.
Yeah, we're in very much a sort of expenses are paid in the payroll, and there's a deadline, and I think ultimately would be able to extend that deadline from being sort of like the 9th of the month to be paid on the 28th. We could probably, be able to say, well, you can you can submit right up to another week or something like that, which for them is some of them are a bit of hand-to-mouth kind of characters.
Everything we do is automated these days.
Yeah.
If we take the tube in London, you'll use your Oyster card, and the barriers will open, and you'll get to the office, and you'll swipe the card on the door, and the doors will open. You'll log on to your laptop through various security procedures. The air conditioning will be working, and then with certain back office functions, expenses being one, we ask people to go back 20 years and say, right, can you fill out this form? And there seems to be an absurdity that I call it the laggard of the finance function, where everything else is automated, but expenses seems to have been left behind.
The whole thing about technology, of like a technical person being involved with the software, is so important to me. So, I think you maybe, in terms of when I'm looking at software, I need to understand the technical side of it, i.e. the security, all those kind of things, the logins, everything like that. And that comes from the IT person that, for instance, you selling me something, not only you can tell me all about the product and the functionality and the cost and the price and what it's going to do for me, I want to know about the technology. And it's invariably the best situation is when the salesperson has a tech guy with him. It's just the best situation ever.
Yeah, I think that's something that we certainly acknowledge at Concur, that it's crucial that you get comfort in our ability to, one, maintain the site, keep it up, that we comply with the latest and greatest guidelines and rules in best practice software development. So that is key to us. Hence, the accreditations that you get, because that's all there to try and give you the comfort. But I think with expenses and finance systems, it's more than simply the R&D development. It's also, do we understand the double entry accounting principles? Do we understand how to net off the VAT, etc.? So, I acknowledge that.
Miles, what's the main? How would you summarise the three-way conversation that you had towards the end of that chat, and what have you taken out of the morning so far?
I think it's been a very useful chat this morning. I think one thing that came over clear to me is that automation is everywhere in our lives, both at home and in the workplace and in the wider world, and we use it every day. Expenses management is perhaps an area that is a laggard with regard to automation, and really it's something, for me, it's a no-brainer. Yes,
okay.
Go on. That's fine.
It's a no-brainer. We did get a question from the floor. Someone wanted to find out what challenges you had when it actually came to implementation and how you tackled them.
There were no what I would call kind of massive hurdles or challenges. There were some key decisions that we had to make along the way. One, which Stephen mentioned, is the configuration. You can set up the software to work in a number of different ways. So we took our time both in 2010 and this time to make sure that the configuration of the software and how it would work for us was going to be right, because there is a lot of choice. Certainly on both occasions we went for the KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid, and we felt that it would be better to sacrifice a little bit of flexibility for making it very, very user-friendly. So configuration was the first thing. The second thing was actually taking the opportunity to update the staff expenses policy. And, well, I forget what number of version that we're on at the moment, but it went through several reiterations with myself, our project manager on this one, the HR director and the finance director, trying to agree on exactly what the policy was going to be, because what we wanted to do was to line up the policy with the software so that they complemented each other and supported each other.
Okay.
And then the third key thing is user acceptance. We talked about, for the users, their viewpoint is what's in it for me. So one, the fact that we were able to give them a quick payment of claims, and then it was about introducing them to the software in a gentle way. There was a user manual when we introduced it first time, which took them step by step through the process. We did offer training, but actually only perhaps 10% of the users actually took that up, because it's largely intuitive. We use the internet all the time, so actually most of it is intuitive in finding a way around the software. And finally, we also ran a pilot scheme for about a dozen users, just to get them and us used to using it before we then rolled it out across the whole business.
However, we've just heard from Miles with some great ideas about implementation that hopefully will be helpful to you. But he also said because he's got the advantage of going a second time around, he's actually focusing a lot more on the reporting that he wants to get out of your system. What kind of thoughts do you have about what you want to get out of it in your company?
I think the sort of being able to analyse when expenses come through, see them being sort of logged on to, we certainly envisage them coming through smartphones, and seeing as they come through, being able to go, oh, well, what kind of things are going on, what kind of expenses are being incurred, and be able to sort of much closer to the actual what activity is going on, and be able to sort of see in a sort of snapshot way. It's all about that moving, and I said earlier about moving the time horizon to be sort of closer to instant, and that's interesting. And also exceptions, where you are able to pick up exceptions quicker at sort of source. There could be somebody who's booking a train ticket or doing something a bit odd, or a flight or something like that, and you see it and you go, goodness gracious, I can deal with that there and now, rather than waiting 3 or 4 weeks before the claim's put in, then processing it, then looking at it sort of 5 or 6 weeks later after the event, because that's all done and gone. That is now dead. But you might be able to pick up on things quicker and get to sort of like an understanding of how things are moving on your business, and that's really important.
Thanks. You've had a few hours now to sort of think back and about what you heard earlier on. Looking at what you'd like to do in your role and the company's kind of strategic direction, what would be the main lessons you've taken out from, and you've heard from Miles and David?
I think the interesting point is that the problems are similar. The problems with a larger company is similar to a smaller company. That's really interesting. It's all about that moving technology on. It's to do with understanding the people. I think there was a point that Miles made about incentivizing those that have to involved with the change to make the change. I think the point about getting paid earlier was really interesting. The whole point about being able to extend the expense cycle, meaning people can claim later and be paid quicker, really interesting that. And for me, looking at all different systems, I think the parallel is really important, that if you can sort of get all your systems into a sort of the same environment, and in terms of the actual being instant, being up to date, will have an impact on our overall reporting cycle. And that's really important. Small business, small medium business, you have to be getting quicker, improving, efficient to make sure we make the right steps in our growth plans.
But it was pretty clear, I think, from Miles's feedback in particular, that actually having a back office, cumbersome back office process in a very small box, as he said earlier, that kind of looks after itself. The routine task that used to take a long time has now disappeared. It frees up a lot of time for people to focus on more strategic elements. So you get a manpower benefit. But also, I think it's important to remember you get a huge productivity benefit from your workforce. So if our strategy is to grow our top line, to increase sales, to improve productivity, and to control costs, then expenses management can play a key role in all of those. Because right now, without automation, I think it was pretty clear from what Stephen was saying earlier that the visibility of expenses is pretty much non-existent. It's very hard to know what one is spending and where one is spending it. It allows you to take control of a routine back office and sometimes painful task and use it actually to drive cost savings into the business whilst at the same time improving productivity. It also has a key role in improving the compliance position of a business. So key to any FD strategy is making sure that the taxman and HMRC in general are satisfied with the business's performance and good governance. So having an automated system that consistently applies policy, that accurately calculates VAT and is readily accessible for reporting plays a key role in getting one of those pain in the neck issues off the table to allow you to focus on the wider business and really drive the business forward.